Welcome to Bound by Books. I am one of your hosts, writer Danielle Bannister, and today we're joined by a special guest, and that guest is
Julie Cassar. Hello.
welcome to Bound by Books. Now, listeners might go, wait a minute, Julie is not a name that we are familiar with hearing or seeing on the podcast. What gives? Well, it's something that on the podcast we're trying to sort of introduce some guest authors into the fray, kind of get their feedback on certain topics that maybe we can't lift up as well. And so today I thought, well, why not have my gal pal Julie on the show?
Yeah.
And so she said yes because she's amazing that way.
Oh, thank you.
So full sort of transparency. Julie and I know each other very well. We are the type of friends that will talk on a daily basis about everything and anything, and usually not a lot about writing. But
right, and sometimes you don't want to be part of those conversations because they're just.
Well, that's a two-way street. That's a two-way street. Sometimes we share things and we're like, really? But that's what friends do.
Right, and I think we've known each other since like 2012, 2011.
Sure. Time is time and direction are they're things that really mean nothing to me. I have no sense of time and no sense of direction. So you could say it was 20 years and I'd say okay, or right. You could say it was 3 years and it'd be like really?
I also showered for you all. I put a very little amount of makeup on because camera, but I was like, I gotta put at least mascara. Little.
Aren't you good? I have some Blipsticks chapstick.
Yes, the colored, your tinted one.
That's no, it's just the regular. It's just the regular.
Oh, look at you.
Just the regular.
And I also wore a very special shirt just for you.
You did?
I did.
What did you wear? I feel like I love it.
Because it's a show that Danielle introduced me to that I fell in love with after she fell in love with it. So it's a very obscure reference to a show. And I think you should award points to the listeners. If they know what this is from, they should win a prize.
Sure. Absolutely. I don't know what that prize would be. Fame and notoriety. I'm not sure. But today what I wanted to specifically ask you on the show, because I think you have something unique that some of the other gals on the podcast don't have, is something that I think you and I can both talk to, is sort of the difference between young adult and new adult books, because we have both written in both. And before we sort of dive a little bit into sort of, well, what's the difference and what makes them, challenging to write, I wanted to give you a couple of minutes to just kind of talk to us about the two series that you have, because one is a young adult and one is a new adult, correct?
New adult. Yep.
Yeah. So tell us about those.
Yes, my first series is young adult, and that is the Ruby Blue series. It was originally 4 books. I ended up writing a 5th book told from a different character's perspective or point of view, basically because the readers just didn't want it to end. And I thought, well, this might be a fun little twist to do. So it's about a girl who sees fairies, and there's sort of this whole other mystery that unfolds. There's, I liken it to a modern day fairy tale, Harry Potter-ish fantasy creatures, but it's set in the real world. It's set here. It's set in our time. And you do eventually go to the magical world of the fairies, but not until book 4. So it's kind of funny. I kind of strung that along, but so yeah, it's sort of sweet love, romance, adventure, little mystery, kind of has everything. Yeah. So it's a very easy read. The age of the characters are around 16-ish. Mm-hmm. That's the main age of the main characters. Yeah. My second series is a trilogy. It's a new adult series. The age of the characters are mid to 20s to 30s, most of them anyway. And that is a trilogy. It's sort of the classic good versus evil. It's about a girl who is in a tragic accident, and as a result of this accident, her life changes, but also she sort of gets this gift to sort of see glimpses of the future. So she's like a seer, and it's sort of, what does she do with this gift? What does she do with this power? But along the way, she realizes she can see her guardian angels. And so she sees sort of this otherworldly things. And again, it's the same type of thing. It's good versus evil. There's demons and angels and all kinds of things that happen. And it's a love story. It's a story of triumph. I mean,
There's some
it's
suspense in there.
suspense. It's definitely like a paranormal, supernatural kind of story with a lot of heat and mystery sort of mixed in.
I think the
A little bit of
next
fear. It's a little scarier. It's a little darker.
Yes, yes. I think your next series, you should write about dragons so that you can cover all things wings.
There are dragons in the first series. If you would read it all, maybe you'd get that. I mean, I don't know.
Exclusively about, like, the heart of it being just the dinosaur. The dinosaur?
Yeah, dinosaur,
Wow.
dragon.
Right.
Whatever.
It's close. They're related. They're related. So
They're
okay, so
scaly and
now
big.
so we've got those there. For me, my young adult is What Moons Do, set in high school, and
Love
so
that
it's
book.
high school, boys, besties, and breakdowns. The typical sort of high school
Yes.
stuff that happens in
Like
high
a John
school.
Hughes film.
Yeah, totally. And then my new adult is my Twin Flames trilogy, college age, talking about twin flames, two halves of the same soul. That's sort of almost like a paranormal, stint as well. So they're sort of similar in terms of ages, and
Yes.
which is what they should be, because that's sort of how I define them, as being different. But how do you define the category of young adult versus new adult? Maybe for somebody who doesn't really know what the difference is, how would you define the difference between those two categories of books?
I think really the main thing for me is it's not necessarily the content that's written about, because as I think we've discussed in the past, there's some young adult books that deal with some very mature type situations and plot points. But I think for me, it's a young adult book is the main cast of characters are young adults, i.e. probably like teenagers-ish, maybe a little younger. And the new adults, they're newly adults. So they're kind of like 18 plus. And I think in a new adult book, you tend to get, at least for me anyways, there's just a little bit more, maybe a little more violence, maybe a little more sex.
Yep.
It's like a little bit more like rated R versus maybe young adult tends to be in PG-13 category, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's how I would describe my books, is like the Ruby Blue books, they're like PG-13. So I'm like, well, if you see it in PG-13 movie, that's probably what's going to happen in this book.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas, the new adult definitely crosses lines. There's not so much the fade to black.
Right.
Where I tend to do that in young adult. And I think most young adult books tend to do that. Like Twilight is a young adult book. Now, there's probably a gajillion, trillion, million, quadzillion adults that have read that book.
Absolutely.
Children's book.
Right.
Same with Harry Potter. Like, how many people have read the Harry Potter series?
Yeah.
So again, and that one, there's some violence in there. There's some, some issues. So to me, that's how I would describe them.
Yeah, definitely. I would concur that the categories are defined by what age your main character is, who's telling the story, what age are they in. If it was a middle grade, they would be in younger grades, and so the content that you would expect would revolve around a middle grade. But if it's a young adult, you're thinking more high school age. What are the things that they're happening in high school? And it can be anything from that sort of John Hughes sort of to very dark things. I mean, it can really vary. I mean, I'm thinking of like The Fault in Our Stars is a
Mhm.
young adult that's dealing with very heavy stuff. To Kill a Mockingbird is, considered,
Right.
young
Oh,
adult. The Giver, all these things that it doesn't have to be like young problems. It's
right.
just that the
Right. I mean,
character telling the story.
The Fault in Our Stars, my daughter like made me read it. She's like, Mom, you have to read this book. And she literally shoved it in my hand and shoved me in my bedroom and shut the door. She's like, you cannot come out till you read some of this.
I just did
And
that
so
with my
I did.
daughter.
Yeah, and so I did, and I was like, oh, well, first of all, John Green is just an amazing
Right.
author.
Right.
But also, like, I was just bawling. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so well written, so good, and so relatable on so many levels to so many people.
Yeah.
Because of the issues dealt with in that book.
Right. So young adult does not mean, it's topics that you will never be able to connect with because you are not a young adult. That's
right.
I feel like that's a very big sort of misconception, maybe for people who don't read a lot.
Yeah, I think so too. I always have to explain to people. They think, oh, you write kids' books. No.
Yeah. If you don't know the difference in the genres, then yeah, it can get confusing. So any opportunity that I can have to sort of lift up what those differences are, I try to try to educate people.
Explain it a little bit, spread the word.
Yeah, exactly. Now, new adult is a little trickier, I think, for some people to wrap their heads around because it's not even a category that you can choose from when putting your book out there. You can't choose a new adult category. That's not a recognized category. And yet.
I mean, it should be.
It should be. But what would you define? So you were saying new adult was more like college age? Is that a safe?
I think so. I think like college age to even into their 20s. Like, I'm trying to think of like a show or something that would be out. Like, for example, I don't know if anyone's watched it, but like there's that show Emily in Paris.
Yeah.
And she's like, probably in her mid-20s. I would consider that like a new adult type
You're
show.
Newly an adult trying to figure out navigating
like life, world, whatever.
As an adult.
I just think new adult just means, you can't fall into the young adult category. I feel like it's just a little bit more mature.
Right. And so the only categories you can choose from are like if we were writing, say, romance, it would be like romance contemporary, romance women's fiction. I would consider a woman's fiction book to be of a character who is older than a new adult category. I would put them more in an adult scenario. So I feel like there is a big gap in sort of that categorizing that could really help people figure out where books go. So new adult is, I think, a category that authors are really trying to like push and get across because it is so different in terms of the types of stories that are being told.
Yes, agreed. And like you said, I mean, it's hard to categorize it when you're, you can't necessarily use that category to sort of delineate it,
Yeah, I mean, like, what did you end up? You might not even remember what you categorized your.
My new adult is under. It's like under supernatural, paranormal, because it is that.
Right.
But if somebody.
But it's also.
Right. It is also new adult. So I wish they had another like subcategory or something we could do, but. Hopefully it'll change.
Petition for that.
Right.
How do we make that a thing?
Right.
Because it's very frustrating to be only able to choose from those categories and be like, and how to explain to somebody the difference between those, trying to erase that stigma that, young adults is only for young adults. I mean, there are.
That is a huge stigma. It's sort of like, yeah, I'm not Judy Blume. I'm not writing books for like 5th and 6th graders.
Forever is, I mean, if we're going to talk about Judy Blume, come on now.
I think that's what people in their head, they think of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Yeah. They think of Judy Blume. They think of books like that. Beverly Cleary.
Right. Those I would consider middle grade.
Right. Again, me too. Yeah. But I think just generally people sort of lump us into that category, the young adult because they just don't understand it.
Right. Do you find
We're
that
educating them now, though.
yeah, yes, we are. Do you find that because of that stigma, it makes it hard to market and sell? Like when you obviously you've had your young adult out longer than your new adult. Have you found that it's easier to promote one than another, or not really, or are they about the same?
I probably think my new adult's a little easier to promote. I think my young adult, I always have to tell people, I'm always putting this sort of disclaimer. It's not a kid's book. It's not just for kids. Like I'm always saying that at book shows, at, book signings everywhere. Like I'm always sort of adding that little edit because people sort of like, oh, young adult. And
I don't have any kids. Or I don't,
I don't
my
have any
kids are
kids,
older.
I'm not a young adult, it's, and I'm like, ugh. So I always have to sort of.
It's almost like a strike against you when you're advertising, to have that even out there as, but to not put it out there feels like you're false advertising.
Right. It's like you have to win them over with your charm and your sales skill, because then they're like, just pick it up and read the back, just see,
But yeah, that's easier to do in person. That's an easier thing to do in person. But if you're like trying to, do a Facebook ad, or if you're just trying to advertise, with just copy, even the word young adult can be like, oh, that's
they just
not
scroll right by it. Yeah, I don't want to look at that. Yeah.
And
I only read horror, or I only read Stephen King, or,
Right.
And then you're sort of like,
yeah, and it's a hard, I know that when I was, I mean, to be fair, I write in too many genres to begin with.
You write in a lot of genres, but they're all wonderful.
I'm trying to remedy that, and I'm trying to stay in a lane. But when I was promoting the young
overrated. Don't stay in a lane. Go all over.
I'm all over. When I was promoting the young adult, it was like crickets trying to get eyes on it, because as again that, I don't read young adult, or I'm not a young adult, or I don't have any kids, or
I loved that book, by the way. I thought it was amazing.
Well, I've actually written a draft of. I wanted, my original plan for that book was to do a duet, to do What Moons Do and What Suns Do. So it was going to be a sort of a duet of the same characters from different.
Yes, I remember you were saying that.
Yeah, one from Heather's point of view and one from Trista's. And because sales for the first one were so, small,
lackluster,
it's almost like, do I want to put in the effort for the editor, for the cover design, just because I have, this idea and this vision to do it? I mean, maybe one day I'll do it, but I found that the young adult was really hard personally to market. But again, that just might be me and the fact that I'm all over the place genre wise, but definitely my worst sale book. And so I'm not in a hurry to duplicate it.
Right. I mean, and I guess I would have to look and see. I don't even look at, me, I don't really.
But your series came out a long time ago too. When it first came out, that was sort of the heyday of, there weren't, a lot of people indie publishing when we first started.
No, there weren't. And I was going to say, it did take a long time to sort of get some footing and some people looking at it. I mean, I remember I worked really hard trying to do that. It was like every night I would be online trying to email people, talk to people, get into book groups. I definitely don't work as hard now, I feel like. Maybe I should. But in terms of that, like I was trying to get it out there so much. And I think what helped too was, I think in any series, in anything with like especially young adult, if you have a series or multiple books that are coming out, when you can release them closer together, you tend to get a bigger audience or a better following, because people want that continuation.
They don't want to wait.
See what happens. They don't want to wait.
Yeah.
And, I just happened to luck out with my first one in that I released the second book 6 months after the first, and then about 8 months later, the third book. So it was like, it was pretty good in terms of being able to get, but it took me a good year to sort of get a decent audience going. But I think when they saw, there's 2 books out and the next one's coming, and it's just a little easier to hook people in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm in the middle of releasing a series myself, and I'm releasing them every 3 months. And that is still too long for people to wait. People are like,
Right.
I'll just wait till the whole thing's out. I'm like,
yeah. And
but in the meantime, I have to pay for edits and cooking.
I know.
And buy the books now.
But I'd like to buy groceries this week.
I want food.
Yeah.
On the same way when it comes to like series and stuff. Oh, I'll wait, it's almost done. I'll wait. And
I'll just wait. I did that with several books. I mean, I didn't start reading the Harry Potter books until they were all out. I was really late to the game on a lot of
sometimes
stuff.
authors, I mean, we try really hard to get things out and out fast, but life happens, and sometimes it might be years before a book comes out. So I get it.
And we have most of us are working day jobs. We have other full-time jobs.
Yeah.
Writing is
families.
Families. Writing is our passion. So we got to squeeze it in when we can. And then, like, as we both know, sometimes it's just, well, you have this problem less than me. I tend to get writer's block way more just because you're like the outlining goddess and I don't really outline much. So I tend to like get in my own way and like sit and stare for a bit. But I mean, that can cause, delays too.
Absolutely. We have the best intentions. We really, really do.
We really do. Yeah, we really do. And, editing's just the worst.
It really is.
Absolute worst. So that takes time too.
Yeah. It takes more time than you think it's going to take, and it's just, nonstop edits, because then, your editor gives you edits and then you've got to fix those edits and then the editor's going to look at it. It's just.
Yeah, it's awful. So what else can we talk to your thousands and thousands of listeners about? What do you think they would love to hear about? I feel like we talk about so many great things all day long. We should start recording those sometimes. Like
some of our conversations, maybe not fit for audiences.
Maybe not all of them.
Maybe not all of them. Well, we did talk a little bit about sort of what some of the hurdles might be for a young adult book, things that might be hard to maybe market wise. But I guess, are there any challenges that you found that were different for writing a young adult than a new adult? Are there, like, if somebody was out there going, you know what, I have this story, but I'm not sure if it should be young adult or new adult, I could see the characters either way. What are sort of like maybe the pros and cons, maybe that could help somebody decide like, oh yeah.
I don't know about pros and cons, but I think for me, the most challenging thing is, and it's come more naturally to me, I think just because my characters were so clear when I started writing them. I thought about the story for so long before I started writing it. But I think the biggest thing is getting inside that young person's mind and making them believable, like their thought processes, their language, how they deal with things, their emotional level.
How complex their thought process is.
Yes, because I've read some young adult books that they just read like it's a 30-year-old character. Like every so often their language, whatever, like pulls me back into their age, but I'm like, they're just so not believable.
You've done that for me too. You helped me with What Moons Do. I had you read that and say, hey, can you point out to me things that maybe don't feel new adult? And there were certain words or certain phrases in there, be like, no, that's you who wrote that. That's too old. And so
that's important too, to have like beta readers or people helping you kind of along the way to sort of keep you in check, because the new adult I think is easier just in that they're older, so they're going to be a little bit more mature. They're going to process things, the situations and whatever. I think young adult is really that hard line to, they're not children, but they're not adults, and they still have a lot of fears and insecurities. And not to say that adults don't have those.
Right.
I just think they're a little different. They're way bigger for teens.
Right.
I think
their problems feel very, very big.
Very big, very unsolvable. They obsess about a lot of things. And again, not to say that adults don't do that. I just think just generally you have to sort of keep all of that in mind when you're writing young adult. Right. And so some young adult books just don't fly for me. Like I've read them and I'm like, I mean, it's a great book, but really your character reads like they're 25, not 18
Right.
or
I
16,
think to that same point, heat level is probably something to think long and hard about too. If you're thinking, I want to write this steamy book, don't make it a young adult. Do yourself a favor,
right? Because it just comes off as like trashy or
sexually inappropriate, and
like
going to come across
the wrong way. Yeah,
you'll probably get in the comments and reviews that this is just don't do it to yourself. If you feel like you want to be putting in some sexy steamy scenes, do it in the legal age of new adult. Don't mess with it. Don't hurt your chances.
Right, and obviously people have sex at all ages. And
obviously, yeah.
It's just a young adult genre book tends to be a little bit more fade to black, tends to be a little bit less promiscuous, less saucy, whatever you want to call it.
And if not, there should be trigger
like a
warnings
disclaimer
around.
Yeah, and they're actually, and I've actually seen this on Amazon. I don't know if you have. If you're like looking at books or something, they'll sometimes have like a little disclaimer like meant for mature readers over 18 or explicit scenes. And if you have to put that, then I just think you're out of the young adult category,
Yeah.
So
yeah. So that would be a big category, I think, to just look at your Steam and the type of problem that your hero heroine is going to be going through.
Mm-hmm.
Is if it's more sort of like in young adult, it's like the problems sort of like revolve around themselves, because when you're a young adult, the problems are, you feel like everything is around you and
your whole
world is going to end around you.
Here's your peer group, basically, right? I mean, that's like, they've done tons of studies on this. Like, this is like a scientific biological fact. Like, that's just sort of where they are, where their brains are, what is important to them. Yeah, there's always that weird person or that one-off person.
Those old souls or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. And not to say they're weird, but different than the mainstream people.
Right.
But yeah, I would say that's probably the most difficult part is, and again, for me, it's not so difficult. I don't know why. I can easily picture.
Well, you have several young people. Had several young people. They're new adults now, but
I know
but you've had 3 children, and so you know how sort of the teen mind works. So you've got that, that mindset. And so that's when I wrote mine too. When my kids were in that high school age, I'm like, oh, this is the type of stuff that I'm hearing them say. I'm gonna write this down.
How they're acting, how they're responding to things, and now it's even a whole new world just with social media and technology, right? Like, we grew up as young adults. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media. We didn't have all this sort of pressure of, wanting to get likes and Snapchats and TikToks and everything else. Like, it just didn't exist. I mean, our world was the 5-block radius we lived in or whatever, basically, and it was like, nobody could call your house after 9 p.m. because your parents would scream at you. Like, there was no pause, rewind, watch a show later. It was like, you missed a show, you missed it for like ever.
Right. Yeah.
A rerun would come on.
So again, those high stakes things when you're, those are the types of high stake problems.
Right. So, but it's different too. Like I said, even like writing young adults now, unless you're setting something back in like the 80s or whatever, which obviously, of course, people could do, but again, another challenge, sort of making it however you're going to relate to your audience, right? Whether you're relating to an older audience, a younger audience, it can still be a young adult book, and you can be writing it for seniors. Senior citizens. Sure. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. And I would suggest if people were on the fence about young adults, is like picking up some young adult books and reading them and trying to get a sense of what is the hero heroine's main problem. What is the obstacles that they're overcoming, to try to get a sense of, oh, okay, these are the level of thought processes that go on.
I don't know if you've ever read them, but like one of a great series that I've loved is PC Cast's and Kristen Cast's House of Night series.
No.
Excellent. They're young adult, they're teenagers, but it's basically like a whole different look at the vampire world.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't read them. They're really good.
Me too.
Yeah, they're very good. They're a little saucy in some spots, but I mean, great young adult book, great, like almost like you said, what they deal with is different because it's got that fantasy element of sort of vampires and humans, and it's not going to be your typical John Hughes teenage drama. You know, it's definitely different, but very well written. And again, I think a ton of adults love that.
Yeah,
love those books.
Well, so I think we've established the young adult and the new adult, what the differences are. You can get away with a little bit more steam and a little bit more intensity in new adult. Now, before we sort of wrap up this conversation, I do want to leave a few minutes to tell people, where could they go if they were interested in checking out either of your series? Where could they find such things?
I'm on Facebook. I am on Amazon and iBooks and basically everywhere that sells books online. You can get my books. You can have your library order them. You can, you can request bookstores, Barnes and Noble, to order them. I'm in their little catalog. They don't stock them on the shelves, but they will order it for you.
Yeah.
I have audiobooks, I have ebooks, I have paperbacks. You want a signed book, I'll hook you up. Just shoot me a message. I'm always game for that. I love to meet readers. I love to talk to readers because they are the driving force that keeps me writing. I mean,
you have a blog too, right? That you do.
I do have a blog. Yep. I have a blog. I have a webpage. I'm telling you, like, I think I've shared this with you recently. Like, I've gotten some messages from readers. They just come, sometimes they just come at the most opportune time. You're like, you're thinking to yourself, God, I don't want to finish this book, or I don't know if I'm going to write another book after this. It's so hard. I don't know. Nobody's reading, and you get these amazing messages from readers or fans that just they'll
light the fire.
They've read your books, 8 times, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I've touched somebody, and this is like forever.
This is why we do what we do. Okay, I will put my butt back in the seat now. I was gonna veg on the couch and watch some YouTube,
but I guess I'll write another chapter.
But now I will write the chapter.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely
always like, people, if you're listening, if you have books you love, leave that review, even if it's a sentence or two. Reach out to the author. 9 times out of 10, they love talking to you. Message them on Facebook, message them, on tweet them, whatever. So many authors, I don't care how big you are, they do love to hear from their fans. They love to see the feedback.
It's such a solitary thing that we do. To know that work is being heard and appreciated.
Like this tangible thing that all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, people are reading me and they love it, and I'm going to keep going. Yeah. It's so great to do that. It's just great. I mean, it's great to give compliments to anybody, right? Compliment your neighbor, your kids, whoever. It's like, spread the love.
Absolutely. Oh, I think we did a fantastic job tackling young adult versus new adult. I think there's no confusion now between. I think we have solved the problem for the rest of the time.
If there's any questions, we've answered them, I hope.
Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and hope that you will tune in next week. This has been Bound by Books. Bye!
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.